You're on the button. You pick up pocket queens. There's a raise in front of you, and you make it $65. The big blind thinks for 2 seconds and calls. Jack high board. You bet. He calls again. Turn is a deuce. You bet. He calls once more. And you're already thinking, what does this guy have? And then it hits you. Earlier tonight, you 3-bet the guy in the hijack, and he called. You 3-bet the guy in the middle position, and he called. You've been 3-betting all night, and not one person has folded. And you're sitting there thinking, does anyone fold around here? A lot of players who study the game, players who run solvers, watch training videos, and know what GTO means, they sit down in a live game and they feel like the world is broken. They 3-bet correctly, the right hands, the right sizes, the right frequencies, and nobody ever folds, and they don't understand why. So they either give up on 3-betting altogether, or they get frustrated and start making bad adjustments. And both of those responses cost them real money. So let's actually try to understand this from the ground up. This is Vinton Poker, precision in, profits out. I'm Vinton, and my entire mission is to help you stop bleeding at the tables and start thinking like someone who actually wins consistently, hand after hand, session after session. And today we're going to talk about one of the most misunderstood concepts in live poker, which is why live villains fold so much less to 3-bets than the solver thinks they should, and what that actually means for your strategy. A solver is solving a very specific problem. It's trying to figure out the optimal strategy against an opponent who's also playing optimally. That's it. That's their entire premise. The solver assumes that when you 3-bet, your opponent is defending correctly, folding the right frequencies, and 4-betting with the right portions of his range. And when both sides are doing that, the resulting strategies are theoretically sound. But your opponent at 1-3 is not a solver. He's a retired teacher who drove 45 minutes to play tonight. He's a contractor who just finished a long week and wants to gamble a little. He's a young guy who thinks he's better than everyone else at the table. And none of these people are thinking about optimal defense frequencies when you make it $65 from the button. They're thinking about something else entirely. The first thing that they're thinking about is the money they've already put in. The moment a player raises to $15 and you make it $65, many players at this level don't think, do I have enough equity to continue? They think, I already have $15 in there. And that mental accounting shifts everything. Sunk cost is not a poker concept. It's a human concept. And live poker is full of humans. The second thing they're thinking about is the flop. They want to see one. They want to know what happens. They're curious, and they're willing to pay to satisfy that curiosity. A player who calls your 3-bet with king jack offsuit is not making a calculated defense. He's buying a ticket to see what comes next. He thinks, if I hit a king, I have a hand. He doesn't think about the fact that you 3-bet and you probably have ace, king, queens, or jacks. And his top pair is probably going to be the most expensive second best hand he's ever played. The third thing that they're thinking about is ego. And this goes deeper than just wanting to call. Many live players are not defending a range. They're defending themselves. The older nit tells himself, I'm not folding ace jack. The maniac thinks, nobody pushes me around at this table. The gambler came here to gamble, and folding preflop feels like a betrayal of his own reason for being there. The retired guy wants to see if he hits. The young wreck thinks he's better than you and wants to prove it post-flop. These people are protecting their reasons and their stories and not their ranges. And elite exploitative players learn to identify those stories and attack them directly because the story determines the behavior, and the behavior is where the money lives. Now try to imagine this hand. You're playing a 1-3 game. A middle position player opens to $15. 3 players call. You're on the button with ace king suited, and you make it $70. The original raiser thinks for a moment, shrugs, and calls. The first caller calls, the second caller folds, and the third caller calls. Now you're going four ways with ace king suited, which is a monster hand, but you're playing it in a pot where three people called a three bet, two of them cold. A solver does not produce this situation. A solver says that once a player three bets, ranges should compress aggressively. Callers should be rare, and cold callers should be almost non existent with anything outside of the very, very strong hands. But at many 1-3 tables, cold calling a 3-bet with king 10 suited or 8-7 suited or a pair of fives is completely normal. The reason is people are not asking, do I have the right price? They're asking, do I want to play? And the answer is almost always yes. That distinction, desire over math and logic, is one of the most important things you can understand about live poker. It's not that recreational players are bad at pot odds. It's that they aren't calculating pot odds in the first place. Their decision is emotional, and emotions don't respond to price. That's why sizing up against these players works. It's not because they're bad at math, it's because they aren't doing math. You can charge more for the same call frequency because desire doesn't have a price ceiling the way rational pot odds do. So the fold equity the solver assigns to your 3-bet simply does not exist in many of these environments. The solver might assume your opponent folds 50% of the times to a 3-bet, but your actual villain might only fold 15% of the time. And that gap is enormous. The second massive reason as why many live players underfold is that they almost never 4-bet. And this is important. In solver land, the opponent you 3-bet is supposed to 4-bet with some frequency. Hands like ace queen, tens, jacks, and suited aces enter the 4-bet range to protect their flatting range and force your bluffs to fold. That balance is what makes 3-bet bluffing profitable in the first place, because sometimes you run into the 4-bet and you fold cleanly. But often enough, opponents just flat and you have position and initiative. At lower stakes, most players massively under 4-bet. Some only 4-bet with aces and kings. Others add ace king and maybe queens when they're feeling confident. But across the board, 4-betting frequencies in live low stakes games are far below what theory calls for. That means when you 3-bet a hand like ace 5 suited and the villain flats, he almost never has a 4-bet hand in his range. He has something like king queen, jacks, tens, or ace jack. And instead of facing a 4-bet with your bluff and having a clean fold, you're going to flop against a hand that has real equity against you. That's exactly why 3-bet bluffs that rely heavily on immediate fold equity lose value in these games. It's not that bluffing disappears entirely. It's that the specific bluffs that need people to fold preflop to show a profit become significantly less effective when the population refuses to fold. Hands like king 9 suited and jack 10 suited that need fold equity to be profitable stop working when the population won't give it to you. But here's the nuance. If you're deep in position and better post flop than your opponents, some speculative 3-bets can still function. A suited real ace in position with deep stacks against a weak villain can still make money, not by forcing a fold pre-flop, but through equity realization, post-flop pressure, and the mistakes your villain will make on later streets. So the adjustment isn't to stop 3-bet bluffing entirely. It's to stop 3-bet bluffing in spots that require a fold to be profitable. That's the real distinction. Before we go on, if you're getting value from this video, give it a like and share it with someone else who's also serious about becoming a crusher just like you. Your support helps this channel grow, and it means the world to me. Also, don't forget to share your thoughts and questions in the comments below as I read them all. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any future episodes. Now let's get to how to actually identify what kind of game you're sitting in. Everything I've just described so far The overcalling, the reluctance to fold, the under four betting, those are tendencies in many live games. They're not universal laws. And if you aren't careful, you can get hurt. There are really three kinds of live game ecosystems you need to recognize. The first is called the call pit. This is the game most people imagine when they think of low live stakes. Players overcall preflop, chase draws they shouldn't, and generally refuse to fold to pressure. In this game, you tighten your 3-bet range significantly. You value bet bigger, you bluff less, and you let your strong hands do the work because the table will pay you off. The second kind of game is the fear pit, and this game is more common than people admit. These are the tables where players have been burned by 3-bets before, where the regular crowd is a little older, a little bit more conservative, and where 3-bet functions almost like a public announcement that you have queens or better. In this game, live players actually overfold. Your 3-bet bluffs become incredibly profitable because you're borrowing the reputation of everyone else who only 3-bet premiums before you. In the fear pit, you widen your 3-bet range, you use smaller sizings, and you attack the fold equity the table is giving you for free. The third kind of game is the reg wars. This is the 2-5 or higher game where multiple competent regulars are sitting with each other, ranges are closer to theory, and the adjustments become more nuanced. This game rewards understanding rather than stereotyping. The best live players don't walk into a card room and think, live players call too much, so I'll just tighten my 3-bets. They sit down, they watch, and they ask more precise questions. Which of these three ecosystems am I actually in right now? And they don't guess. They track. They observe every 3-bet they see for the first hour, and they note what happens. Does the table fold? Does it call? Does anyone 4-bet? And only after they can verbally answer those questions do they commit to an adjustment. Because the question is never how do live players play? The question is always how does this particular table play tonight? So once you've done that work, once you have watched, tracked, and you can actually name the ecosystem you're sitting in, the adjustments become straightforward. If you're in the call pit, here's what you do. You tighten your 3-betting range. You concentrate your 3-bets into hands that are genuinely happy to be called. Queens, kings, aces, ace-king, jacks, tens, ace-queen, and ace-jack suited all become significantly more profitable when villains are calling with king-jack offsuit, queen-10 offsuit, and small pairs. And you size up. If someone is going to call your 3-bet regardless of whether you make it $60 or $80, you make it $80. Their decision is desire-based, not math-based, so charge more for that desire. And here's where I want to share something with you, because a lot of you watching this are already starting to understand that exploitative poker is where the real money lives. And if you want a structured system for making these adjustments hand after hand, session after session, I invite you to check out my Delusion Killer Masterclass. Dozens and dozens of you have already joined this program, and I'm genuinely impressed by your dedication and your progress. This is a 292 lesson course built specifically for live cash game players who want to move from losing or breaking even to playing like someone who crushes consistently. You can find it at vintonpoker.com/course or click the link in the description below. And if you want to work with me directly, one-on-one, I offer a free 60-minute coaching session over video call. You can book your session directly with me through WhatsApp. My students are crushing the very games they used to bleed in consistently, and I'd love to help you do the same. The link for my WhatsApp is also in the description below. Now back to overcalling live villains and how to exploit them. The mistake doesn't stop preflop. The preflop mistakes just set up everything that comes after. And understanding how that works is where your edge actually lives and grows. When a villain calls your 3-bet with king-jack offsuit against your ace-king, he's not losing a lot of money preflop. The pot is $120 and he has some equity. But now the flop comes King 8-3 rainbow. He has top pair weak kicker. And suddenly this guy feels like he has arrived. He doesn't know he's in trouble. He thinks he's hit. And hitting feels good. And feeling good makes people call. And here's the part that really matters. He's not going to reevaluate his hand on the turn. He's not going to reassess it on the river because the same emotional logic that justified calling a 3-bet is still running through his head. He told himself a story pre-flop. I want to see a flop. I might hit. And now he hit. And now as the hand progresses, that story gets even louder, not quieter. Dominated hands don't become expensive pre-flop. They become expensive because people refuse to downgrade their hand strength as new information arrives. The king jack doesn't know it's losing on a king high board. The man holding king jack may know something is wrong, but he can't bring himself to fold because he's been calling this hand since before the flop, and stopping now feels like admitting a mistake he doesn't want to admit. He called pre-flop because he wanted to play. He called the flop because he has top pair. He called the turn because he's already in so far. And on the river, reality finally arrives. And by then, most of the money is already gone in the middle. That's the typical pattern. That is why pre-flop mistakes is the entry point and the post-flop streets are where the real money actually transfers. You're not extracting value because your villain made a bad pre-flop call. You're extracting value because his emotional attachment to that bad call makes him incapable of making the correct fold on any subsequent street. Now, this connects to how people experience risk as the hand deepens. Pre-flop, people are curious and optimistic. The flop hits, and they're still optimistic because they flopped something. On the turn, they might feel a little nervous, but they've already committed 2 bets, so they rationalize. And on the river, reality finally hits. The pot is big, the decision feels real, and now the same person who called everything without hesitation is suddenly aware that his hand is going to cost him. This is why many live players become more price sensitive on later streets against bigger bets. Pre-flop curiosity doesn't have a hard stop. River decisions do. And that's where selective bluffing opportunities emerge against the right opponent in the right situation. Not as a blanket strategy, but because curiosity fades on later streets and fear increases. And fear is more willing to fold than curiosity ever was. This is player dependent and situation dependent. There are calling stations who will call you down on the river just as happily as they called pre-flop. Reading the individual matters more than the population rules. And this connects to something that you need to understand about why live players are so dramatically underbluffed overall. This isn't because recreational players understand population frequencies or know that big river bets tend to represent value. It's something more fundamental. Human beings naturally dislike risking their own money. People prefer calling with uncertainty because calling feels passive and safe. But betting with uncertainty, risking chips when you don't have the best hand, that feels dangerous in a way that most people simply aren't comfortable with. So, what you see at live tables is overcalling combined with almost no bluffing. The same guy who will call 3 streets with second pair will almost never fire a river bluff without a very strong hand. And when you see that passive player suddenly wake up and bet large, his range is almost always weighted massively towards value. Not because he understands game theory, absolutely not, but because humans are naturally risk averse as aggressors, even when aggression would serve them better. That asymmetry, overcalling and underbluffing, creates structural opportunities for you if you understand it clearly. And here's the most important thought I want to leave you with today, because this is where everything ties together. The solver is not wrong. The solver is solving a different game. It's solving the game of poker against a rational opponent who's trying to maximize expected value. And that's a useful baseline. You need to know what correct looks like so you know where your villains are deviating from it. But the average player only studies the chart. The great players study the people. The average player asks, how often should villain fold to my 3-bet? The crusher asks, why are these particular humans just always calling? Because those are two completely different questions and they lead to completely different strategies. The fold frequency is a number. The reason behind the fold frequency is a human being with a story, an ego, a habit, a threshold for pain that has nothing to do with the pot odds. You're not playing against machines. You're playing against people. People with emotions, with habits, with egos, with bad days and good days, and 45-minute drives to get here. And the money in live poker is not made by memorizing equilibrium frequencies. It's made by understanding precisely how real human beings deviate from them and being in a position to benefit from that every single time it happens. Now, if you want to keep improving and keep leveling up your game, watch this next video. As always, I'm your friend, Vinton. GG.